But what is the best way to sell big government and then world government to a people like ours, historically devoted to an independent republic of limited powers? The answer is simple. In revolutionary literature, the tactic is known as pressure from above and below. It's the strategy that Colonel House laid down in his book, Philip Drew, Administrator. Deliberately create problems, and then offer only those solutions that result in the expansion of government. Create conditions so frightful at home and abroad that the abandonment of personal liberties and national sovereignty will appear as a reasonable price for a return to domestic tranquility and world peace.
Posting on his site 9/11 Research, mathematician and software engineer Jim Hoffman studied the expansion of the dust cloud. He discovered this phenomenon required at least 10 times more energy than would be available from the falling mass of the tower.
Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God, I told you!
That's not even counting the energy needed to break the building apart and create all the dust.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
Only powerful explosives could explain the presence of so much energy. Public pressure forced a new government investigation. The 9/11 Commission issued its report in August 2004, but they ignored all of the troubling questions raised by the Truth Movement. Instead, they assumed the official story about the 19 hijackers and framed public debate around intelligence failures. Did the Bush administration receive warnings that Al-Qaeda was going to strike? How specific were the threats? How can security be strengthened in the future? The 9/11 Commission did offer one casual little footnote about the frailty of the Twin Towers. Does this look like a hollow steel shaft? The 9/11 Commission did not even mention Building 7. But we did get some very interesting testimony from Transportation Secretary Norman Mineta.
During the time that the airplane coming in to the Pentagon, there was a young man who would come in and say to the Vice President, the plane is 50 miles out. The plane is 30 miles out. And when it got down to the plane is 10 miles out, the young man also said to the Vice President, do the orders still stand? And the Vice President turned and whipped his neck around and said, of course the orders still stand. Have you heard anything to the contrary?
What were those orders? To shoot the plane down or to not shoot it down? In 2005, Jim Fetzer, professor emeritus from the University of Minnesota and noted JFK assassination researcher, teamed up with BYU nuclear physicist Stephen Jones to create the Scholars for 9/11 Truth. The academic affiliations were adding much-needed visibility to the 9/11 Truth movement. Fetzer scored 3 appearances on Fox News.
Joining us now, the co-chairman of Scholars for 9/11 Truth, Professor Emeritus at the University of Minnesota at Duluth, James Fetzer.
No, you're confused, and I hope that Fox usually does a better job on their research than this.
All right, so
but I created an organization of faculty and scholars to study 9/11.
Oh, and I want to be clear on this.
We discovered that practically everything the government has told us about it is false.
Yeah, I want to get into
including physicists, mechanical engineers, pilots, aeronautical engineers.
Sure.
We've discovered that the Twin Towers were brought down by controlled demolition.
Do the orders still stand?
The order had to be to not shoot down the plane that was approaching the Pentagon. After all, the order should have been to shoot it down. Shooting it down would be the obvious thing to do when you consider that you're going to lose the passengers in the plane if you shoot it down, but if you don't, you're going to use the passengers in the plane and also, of course, all the personnel and property at the target.
I think the very kindest thing that we can say about George W. Bush and all the people in the U.S. government that have been involved in this massive cover-up, the very kindest thing we can say is that they were aware of the impending attacks and let them happen.
Bob Bowman is a nuclear scientist and a former head of the Star Wars program. Bowman was voicing a theory that became known as Psyop, let it happen on purpose. 2005 also saw the release of a video that became the first internet blockbuster.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Bring it back.
Loose Change, written and directed by 22-year-old Dylan Avery. Loose Change implied what a lot of people were coming to believe, that the government didn't just allow 9/11, but that it orchestrated it, made it happen on purpose, or Psyop. But why would the U.S. government do such a thing?
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
In September of 2000, 1 year before 9/11, a think tank called the Project for a New American Century, consisting of future Bush administration officials Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, Scooter Libby, Paul Wolfowitz, and media icon Bill Kristol, released a document called Rebuilding America's Defenses. They envisioned the expansion of U.S. military dominance on land, sea, air, space, and cyberspace. They envisioned multiple simultaneous large-scale wars. But they complained that the process of transformation, even if it brings revolutionary change, is likely to be a long one, absent some catastrophic and catalyzing event, like a new Pearl Harbor.
But what is the best way to sell big government and then world government to a people like ours, historically devoted to an independent republic of limited powers? The answer is simple. In revolutionary literature, the tactic is known as pressure from above and below. It's the strategy that Colonel House laid down in his book, Philip Drew, Administrator. Deliberately create problems, and then offer only those solutions that result in the expansion of government. Create conditions so frightful at home and abroad that the abandonment of personal liberties and national sovereignty will appear as a reasonable price for a return to domestic tranquility and world peace.
In September 2005, the U.S. government's National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, released their final study of the Twin Towers. The 10,000-page report contained very sophisticated computer models of the airplanes and the fires, but no effort was made to model or study the actual destruction. They dismissed it with 3 words. Greening has created a mathematical model attempting to show that a gravity-driven collapse was possible.
They stop at that global collapse ensued famous mantra. They just say global collapse ensued, and then they walk away. It's like, it started collapsing, we can go home now. I kind of this takes over where NIST stops.
Greening and co-author Besant are continuing the original piledriver theory.
Upper block drops 1 floor, 3.7 meters, hits the floor below, somehow manages to break the support structures of that floor. That floor now is therefore added to the block. It now hits the next floor, so on down. So the mass of the upper block actually grows, and it just chews away at the building.
This is what Dr. Greening is imagining. A strong upper block pile driving down through the tower. But this is not what we see. What we see is the top part of the building disintegrates before the undamaged lower part moves an inch. Here's a different view. Watch the corner. So much for Greening's pile driver. As the towers were being destroyed, large ejections of debris were observed far below the main front. Loose change claimed they were explosive charges going off. NIST and popular mechanics tried to explain it away with a piston analogy.
When the top of that building comes down, all that air has to come out. And where it comes out the windows. It blows out the windows.
For a piston to work compressing air, it has to be sealed. I asked Dr. Greening how collapsing towers could be sealed.
There were elevator shafts and stairwells. The air could be pushed down those. In a sense, the building itself is self-sealing, so some of it would be pushed out of that particular floor, out of the windows.
But imagine for a moment that floors are intact and sealed and pushing air down. They cannot fall any faster than free fall. The main collapse front has only had enough time to get down to this level. Yet we are to believe that material 20 stories below has already been crushed? How can that possibly be? And there is another problem with the official collapse theory. Smoke from the fires was drifting up and off to the southeast because that's the way the breeze was blowing. As the buildings are destroyed, look what happens in this area. The distance between where that building is and that smoke increases because the building's falling down away from that area.
Yeah.
And yet, for some strange reason, that smoke begins to really expand and get...
Yeah, I've never seen that. Well, I've seen this particular video, but that little puff there at the end is strange.